I came back from that 3-day trip expecting nothing more than my familiar routine. Feed the cat, sort the mail, maybe order takeout. Just the usual. But something shifted the moment I stepped out of the car. It wasn't just the cold air wrapping around the porch, it was the stillness, like the house itself was holding its breath. The flower pots I left near the stairs were gone, replaced with a more sterile arrangement. No sign of the old doormat with my mother's handwriting, the one that read, "Welcome home, sweetheart." The mailbox was empty, but the latch was left open. I didn't think much of it until I saw the envelope. FedEx, real estate logo. I stood there staring at it like it might disappear if I blinked hard enough. My name wasn't even on the front. I opened it with shaky fingers, the paper sliding out like it knew it carried a punch. A formal letter. This property has been listed for sale, effective immediately. Signed by my father-in-law. No greeting, no explanation, just final. I read it again. And again. Was this a mistake? Did I miss a phone call, an email? My head spun. I walked inside, hoping the house would feel familiar enough to snap me out of whatever alternate reality I'd just stepped into. It didn't. The dining room table had been pushed slightly to the left. A framed photo of my mother and me, which always sat above the fireplace, was gone. In its place, an empty hook and a faint outline where it had been. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. I sat on the couch with the letter in my hand, trying to breathe normally. The paper trembled as I held it, not from the cold, but from me. I looked around at the walls I helped paint, the crown molding we restored by hand. This wasn't just a house. It was a federally protected property, historic, significant. My mother's legacy, preserved under federal registry after her passing. This was the house we fought to save from demolition. We spent months in court, years in restoration. My mother died in the back bedroom, surrounded by the lavender she planted decades ago. This place wasn't just bricks, it was bones and memory. I reached for my phone, called my husband, straight to voicemail. Again. His inbox was full. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on, out of habit more than anything else. My hands trembled as I grabbed a mug, but I didn't pour the tea. I couldn't. The noise inside my head drowned out everything else. I sat at the table staring at nothing until I whispered, "What the hell is happening?" It wasn't like I hadn't heard the cracks before. "Too sentimental," my father-in-law once said, rolling his eyes when I brought up the garden renovation. "You can't live inside a memory." At the time, I shrugged it off. He was always like that, practical, blunt, cold. But this? I went to the hallway drawer, the one that held old tax files and warranty papers. I dug through until I found the deed folder. It hit me in the stomach when I opened it. His name. Just his. 2 years ago, he asked if we could temporarily move the deed under his name, some nonsense about tax benefits, inheritance optimization. Just paperwork, he'd said, safer for all of us. Like a fool, I agreed. I never thought he'd take it. But there it was in black and white. Legally, this house didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't even realize I had started crying until a tear fell onto the page. I wiped it quickly, furious with myself. I grabbed my keys and drove without thinking. My hands were steady now, not calm, just numb. Their house looked the same as always, white siding, brick path. I rang the bell. He answered like he'd been expecting a delivery, not a confrontation. "Oh, you're back early." I didn't say anything. I held out the letter. He scanned it, handed it back, then said it like he was telling me we were out of milk. "We're selling your house, sweetheart. It's time." My mouth went dry. "You said it was just paperwork." He smiled, that smug, dismissive smile I'd seen too many times. "You were never really the owner anyway." It was like a punch, but he didn't stop there. "You lived there." "That's true. But own it." "No. That was never the plan." I opened my mouth, but no words came. He was already turning away. And just like that, he closed the door, like it was nothing, like I was nothing. But he had no idea. I wasn't done, not even close. I stayed in the car after the door shut behind him, engine off, hands in my lap, breathing like I was hiding from something that had already found me. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. A porch light across the street flickered, and a dog barked somewhere nearby, high-pitched and insistent. It felt like even the neighborhood knew something was wrong. I pulled my phone from the console and stared at the screen. Missed calls. A few texts I hadn't seen. Nothing important. Grocery deals? Appointment reminders. Silence from the one person who should have been screaming with me. I swiped up and down, rereading old messages like they could explain something. They didn't. A quote floated through my mind. Something from a book club years ago. Sometimes silence is a reply, and sometimes it's a confession. I tapped on his name again. My husband. The man who once stood in this very house and told me, no matter what happens, this place will always be yours. My thumb hovered over the call button. I didn't want to hear what he had to say, but I needed to know who he was now. I pressed it. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, honey." His voice was flat, practiced, like someone reading off a script. The kind of voice you use when you're already trying to end the conversation before it begins. "You need to explain," I said, skipping the greetings. "The letter, the sale, your father." A pause. "It's just business," he said finally. "You're taking it too personally. You sold the house." "Technically, I didn't. It's under my dad's name. You knew that. Because you told me it was temporary, for tax reasons, and now it's on the market, with photos, listed." He exhaled like I was making a fuss over nothing. "He's got better plans for it, okay? That place is falling apart anyway, falling apart." I gripped the steering wheel like it might keep me from unraveling. "Why didn't you tell me?" Another pause, then muffled voices in the background. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like someone reading a document. Legalese. He started to say something, then cut himself off. "Look, it's too late to stop it now." That did it. I hung up, just ended the call before he could twist the knife any further. My hand dropped to my lap, still holding the phone. I stared at nothing. Then I stared harder. If it was too late to stop, it meant this was never an accident. It meant he knew. Maybe not just now, maybe from the start. I drove home on autopilot. The night outside the windshield felt too quiet, too clean. When I walked through the door, the house no longer felt like mine, but it still smelled like us. I stood in the hallway for a long time before moving. In the closet was a box labeled tax deed. I pulled it down, sat cross-legged on the floor, and started digging. Receipts, bills, folders. Then I found it. A contract with my signature. 2 years ago. We'd applied for a historic renovation grant. They said we needed to transfer temporary ownership for eligibility. I signed it. Trusted them. Trusted him. At the bottom of page 3, in the tiniest print I'd ever seen, if title is not reverted within 24 months, ownership is considered permanent. All rights forfeited. I dropped the folder. I hadn't missed the window. They closed it on me and nailed it shut. I remembered a holiday dinner, his father raising a glass and saying with a grin, "Paperwork is just a formality, darling." And I had smiled. I laughed. Because that's what you do when you think you're in on the joke, not realizing you're the punchline. I wasn't angry, not then. I was cold. Clear. I picked up the contract again, read every word. Twice. Then I opened my laptop. Federal preservation laws, property rights, legal precedents for malicious intent in ownership transfers. I wasn't a lawyer, but I didn't need to be one. I needed to be dangerous enough to make them think twice. I remembered something a friend once said in law school. We were tipsy, playing cards, and she held up her glass and declared, "The law's slow, but if you know how to swing it, it hits like a hammer." I started typing a message to her, then stopped. Not yet. First, I had to understand every inch of the ground I was standing on, every weak spot in their case, every word they said or didn't say. I leaned back in the chair. The air felt different now. I wasn't just a woman blindsided by betrayal anymore. This wasn't just about a house. It was about me. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with the ceiling above me like a screen playing that call on loop. Every word, every pause, his tone. the absence of apology. My chest rose and fell, shallow and tight. I stared at the shadows moving across the room as the night deepened. That's when I heard it, a faint ticking from the hallway. At first, I thought it was in my head, but it grew steadier. I sat up. It was the grandfather clock, the one my mother gave me when she was too sick to stand long enough to rap it herself. I'd moved it into the hall because it reminded me of her voice. She always said it made the house feel honest, because it never lied about the hour. The ticking brought something else back. A moment I had shrugged off, until now. Last year, my mother-in-law had come over unannounced. She walked through the living room like she was inspecting a hotel lobby, then paused at the wall of photo frames. "You should pack away some of these old pictures," she said, with that clipped sweetness she wore like perfume. "It's just so cluttered." I'd laughed. I thought she meant redecorating. But standing in the hallway now, I realized it wasn't about clutter, it was about erasure. I threw on a sweatshirt, pulled my hair into a knot, and padded barefoot down to the room we used for storage. The air was still, the kind of stillness that makes your ears ring. I flicked the light on and knelt by the shelf where I'd stacked the photo albums. There were 5. I picked the one marked Family Years 2012 to 2019. Dust stuck to my fingers as I flipped through it. First few pages, birthdays, holidays, vacations. I remembered all of them. I remembered what food was served, what jokes were told, what I wore. But I wasn't in them. I stared harder. There were group shots I should have been in, like the 4th of July barbecue at the lake. I cooked the damn ribs that day. I poured drinks, handed out sparklers, took photos for everyone else. But in the album, I was missing. One picture had a strange blur near the edge of the frame, right where I remembered standing, like someone tried to cover me with bad Photoshop. My hand went cold on the page. A voice came back to me. My brother-in-law, laughing after a wedding years ago. "You always take ghost photos, like you're there but you're not." I laughed then. I didn't know I was being warned. They didn't just sell the house. They'd been deleting me, piece by piece. I slammed the album shut and sat back. A flash of Thanksgiving came rushing in. 2 years ago. The table had been too long for the dining room, chairs crammed together. Everyone talked over each other, trading stories about childhood homes, old land deeds, properties. Someone said, "That old place should be sold while it still has value." I'd looked to my husband. He reached for my hand under the table, but when his father gave him that look, he let go. Just like that. That night, his mother brought me a glass of red and said, "Not everything lasts forever, not even houses or roles." I thought she meant my job at the time, a poetic comment. Now it felt like a goodbye she'd already written for me. How many signs had I dismissed? Because I didn't want to believe love could lie. Because I trusted the silences between words. I sat there on the floor for a long time, surrounded by albums that were supposed to tell the story of our family. Tears came, not from pain, but from clarity. That's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes grief is knowing you weren't crazy. You were right. You were just outnumbered. I reached for a photo, one where my image had been clumsily erased. I started to tear it. My hand froze. No, this wasn't garbage. This was evidence. I grabbed my phone and began taking pictures. Every altered page, every missing frame, every cropped border. Folder after folder. Then I opened my messages and typed, "I need to understand property law, urgently." Sent it to a name I hadn't touched in years, my friend from law school days, the one who used to quiz herself by reading old case files for fun. My mother's voice echoed in my head. She used to say, "The only thing more dangerous than a liar is the one who makes you doubt your own memory." They wanted me gone quietly. Now I had a file on my laptop named, "Proof They Planned It." I woke before the sun touched the windows. My mind hadn't rested at all. Every click of the clock, every shadow against the wall dragged me right back to those photo albums and everything they meant. I sat up and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. 2 missed calls, no voicemails, a single email marked flagged with a subject line that read, "Family Real Estate." I tapped it open. It was a newsletter, promotional, from a development firm I'd never heard of. But the first image stopped me cold. It was my foyer, my exact wallpaper, my mother's refinished credenza, the stained glass detail above the door I'd spent weeks restoring. Then another shot, the reading nook upstairs, the blue chair I had custom made. No one outside this house ever saw that space. It clicked. The neighbor who passed by weeks ago, asking, "So y'all remodeling again?" saw a guy with a big lens hanging around the front porch. I thought he was joking. I laughed and told him no. But now my stomach dropped. I muttered, "Is someone filming this right now?" I ran to the security panel, pulled up the cloud log. Motion alerts from 3 nights ago, mid-afternoon. Cameras pointed at odd angles, accessed remotely. By who? And when? My palms were slick. They weren't just planning to sell the house, they were staging it. Behind my back. I pulled up the link from the email again. It took me to a page titled Luxury Heritage Estates. My house was the crown jewel in their collection. There was a slick virtual tour, gliding through rooms I'd decorated, memories I'd built. They even had captions, chef-style kitchen and handcrafted millwork. Like this was some catalog and I was just another prop. I scrolled to the bottom. Listed agent, Corey Vale. I'd never met the man. I found his email and typed quickly, "Mr. Vale, please explain the legal grounds on which you are using my home's interior in your marketing materials. I have not given consent." "I expect a full response immediately." His reply came faster than I expected. "Commissioned by landowners. All photography was conducted with authorization from title holders. Paperwork will follow." Landowners, not homeowner, not me. I gritted my teeth. So this was their strategy. Turn my home into a brochure, so by the time I screamed, it looked like I was late to the party. I started searching for every mention of the listing. That's when I found it. A post on a small neighborhood forum, anonymous user but with receipts, screenshots of internal emails. The first was from Gideon, my father-in-law. "Make sure she sees the tour. Pressure is necessary." My skin crawled. The second was from Thad, my brother-in-law. "Don't stop her now. The deal's almost closed." I stared at the screen. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was confirmation. The plan wasn't rushed. It was rehearsed. I forwarded the whole thread to my old law school friend with a message. "Need to preserve this chain. Time-stamped. Urgent." Then I stared at the subject line again. "Make sure she sees it." So it was never a mistake that I got that email. It was part of the push, part of the erasure. I whispered aloud, "They used my home as a billboard behind my back." By mid-morning, I was out the door. Drove straight to the real estate office printed on the listing. Didn't call ahead, didn't knock. Walked right into their front desk like I was chasing a fire. Corey was in the back, but someone must have told him I was coming. He greeted me with a polite grin that vanished the second I dropped the printed email thread on his desk. "Who authorized this campaign?" He didn't blink. "Ma'am, I'm not the one managing those permissions. I just execute listings. Not my concern who owns what." I leaned in. "Your advertising rooms I never gave anyone access to. So either you broke in or someone lied for you. Either way, you're complicit now." He shifted, suddenly unsure what smile to wear. I grabbed the email and left. Walked across the street into a cafe, needing air and caffeine and distance, fast. I sat down and opened my files again, scanned the deed transfer papers, cross-checked the address on the listing. That's when I saw it. Under ownership, it said, "Former primary occupant." Not owner. Occupant. They weren't just trying to take the house. They were writing me out of the story. I pressed call on Gideon's number. "Third ring," he answered. "I arranged it because the market's ripe," he said, like he was talking about a truck for sale, not the home I bled into. My voice stayed even. "That's not an answer." When I got back from the real estate office, my hands were still trembling, but my mind was clearer than it had been in days. The house no longer felt like mine. The living room I'd painted by hand looked staged, like a model home waiting for strangers. Even the smell of the wood polish felt foreign, like someone else's idea of heritage. On the kitchen table, I spread everything out. The doctored photos, the leaked emails, and the contract I'd once signed without reading the fine print. My phone buzzed. A text from him. "Let's talk tonight. Alone." Just like that. No apology, no explanation. Only control disguised as intimacy. I stared at those words, remembering all his small betrayals. Just business. Temporary transfer. You're overthinking. I pressed record on a small voice recorder hidden under a napkin. My mother used to say, "The truth isn't real unless you can prove it." Tonight, I'd get proof. He arrived a little after 8. His eyes darted from the papers to me, but didn't linger on either. "Honey, this is all a misunderstanding," he began, like he was reading off a script. "Dad's just restructuring things. It's not what it looks like." I kept my voice level. "I have the emails, the listings, the contract. Which part isn't what it looks like?" He moved closer, palms up. "You know how Dad gets. I didn't have a choice. He insisted." I slid the printed thread across the table. "Your name's on the clause. Your signature locked me out of my own deed. Tell me you didn't know." His jaw clenched. For a moment, the mask slipped. "I knew it would upset you, but you always bounce back. You're strong. Strong." I almost laughed. They had confused patience with weakness. That ended tonight. He excused himself to the bathroom, mumbling about washing his hands. As soon as the door clicked shut, I grabbed the brown envelope left on the porch earlier that day. No return address. Inside were photocopied journal pages in Gideon's handwriting. "Two attached to the house, must gradually ease her out," read an entry from 6 months ago. Another from last month. "By Christmas, it should be in Thad's name. A cleaner lineage." I gripped the pages so tight they crumpled. This wasn't just a financial scheme. This was an erasure, a plan to scrub me from the story altogether. My heart thudded against my ribs. I slid the papers under a stack of magazines just as the bathroom door opened. He came back, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Look," he said, "once the house is sold, we can start over. Maybe a new place, a clean slate." I stood, letting my shadow fall across the documents. "We'll talk soon," I said quietly. His brows knit, sensing something but not knowing what. When he left, I locked the front door, drew the blinds, and exhaled a long, steady breath. I scanned the journal pages and sent them to my attorney friend with the message, "Plan B just became Plan A." I remembered something Eleanor Roosevelt once said, a line my mother kept taped to the fridge. "A woman is like a tea bag. You can't tell how strong she is until you put her in hot water." I packed a small overnight bag and slipped the original documents into a safety deposit envelope. As I zipped it shut, I realized something I hadn't felt in weeks: leverage. By the time I stepped into my kitchen the next morning, my phone was already ringing. It was my attorney. "They've responded, and not with grace." I pressed the call to speaker and stared out the window while he spoke. "They're challenging your motion with a competency claim. Filed an emergency petition declaring you mentally unfit to handle real estate matters." Silence. Then the lawyer continued. "They included emails. Fabricated ones. You supposedly wrote them, but the syntax is off. Sloppy work." The word unfit settled like a stone in my gut. A red flag now hovered over my name in the National Property Registry, the kind of flag that didn't just make things harder. It made things nearly impossible. I sat down, fingers clenched around a chipped mug. My grandfather's voice echoed in my memory. "They'll call you crazy when they can't control you." He used to say that after watching his sister get locked out of her own farm by a slick-talking banker. I used to think it was just bitterness. Now it felt like prophecy. By noon, the neighborhood whispers had started. I caught the first hint through a text from Marlene, my old neighbor. "Heard something weird from Donna on 3rd. Says you've been acting off. You okay?" Then the Facebook post hit. A blog under the name Concerned Kin 88 was being shared by the local community page. A soft-toned hit piece. "A loved one lost in confusion," it read. It painted me as paranoid. Claimed I was delusional about the property's federal filing. Even implied I had been emotionally unstable for years. There were screenshots, too. Selectively edited text chains, stripped of context, made to look like I was spiraling. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I copied every post, screenshot every comment, and logged them all with timestamps. And then I checked the metadata. It traced back to Thad's assistant. She once came to me asking for interior photos for a surprise gallery. She smiled sweet and called me family. I opened a spreadsheet and began building a file. If they wanted to play public opinion like a fiddle, fine. But I was going to document every single string. By late afternoon, I sat across from my attorney again. He laid out the new court filing, an emergency hearing, 3 days from now. They're playing hardball, he said. I nodded. Then let's dig in. We reviewed witness options. My old neighbor who watched Thad pace outside my house late at night, the clerk from the Federal Registry who confirmed my name still appeared on the deed, and a local journalist who once investigated predatory probate transfers. I remembered the camera hidden in the old birdhouse near the mailbox. I hadn't thought about it in years. Later that evening, I pulled the SD card and scrubbed through the past week. There it was. Thad's car, parked at 2:16 a.m., 2 nights ago. Engine idling, headlights off. I emailed the clip to my lawyer. With it, a single line. They underestimated the wrong woman. That night, I drafted a letter. Not to my family, not to the court, to the town, to the neighbors I'd known for 2 decades. To the community I love, it began. I didn't post it, not yet. But the words were there, waiting. I reached out to a journalist I'd once met at a town hall on eminent domain abuses. He picked up on the second ring. I remember you, he said. Let's talk. My lawyer's last advice before I left his office echoed in my ears as I drove home. Silence is your weapon for now. Don't fire until it counts. Back home, I reset my phone, deleted every traceable app, changed the passwords, then changed the locks. At midnight, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looked myself in the eye. This isn't survival anymore, I whispered. It's war. My phone buzzed before the sun was up. I rolled over, half expecting another message from my attorney or maybe a reminder for the court hearing. Instead, it was a flood of notifications, texts, missed calls, and one headline that slapped me awake. Wife loses her mind over house dispute. It was from a local digital paper that I'd seen shared in bake sale fundraisers and lost dog alerts. Now it was weaponized. Beneath the headline were quotes from concerned neighbors and longtime family friends. No names, of course, just claims that I'd been unstable for years, that I was obsessive and struggling to distinguish fact from fear. I opened the comments. I shouldn't have, but I did. Words like unhinged and greedy popped up more than once. One read, "She should be grateful she's not in a facility." The same people who used to smile at me during Sunday service were now passing judgment in the form of digital pitchforks. A few old friends texted asking if I was okay, but their tones were measured, cautious, like I was a live wire they didn't want to touch. And that was when it hit me. This wasn't slander. This was strategy, a full-blown PR campaign designed to isolate me, discredit me, erase me before I could speak for myself. Later that afternoon, I was boxing up documents for my attorney when I noticed something missing. My mother's necklace. It had hung from a velvet hook inside my bedroom armoire. A modest piece, silver with a faint green tint from years of polishing. My mother had given it to me on my wedding day. Her words still lingered. May this always remind you of home, no matter what changes. I called Izzy. Oh, that necklace? She chirped, like we were catching up over iced tea. It's being featured in the family gallery. We've framed it as a symbolic gift to the new matriarch. It really pops in the foyer light. My stomach curled. My mother's legacy, now hung like a museum relic and rewritten as someone else's tribute. That night, there was a holiday dinner. Some extended family gathering, the kind with roast ham, lukewarm sweet tea, and passive-aggressive blessings. I walked in wearing black, no jewelry, no makeup, just the small, empty necklace box clutched in my palm like a silent weapon. Gideon greeted me with rehearsed warmth. Izzy smiled, as if nothing had happened. I didn't wait for introductions. I held the box in the air and asked one question, voice even, eyes steady. Whose courage stole my legacy, and why? The room fell quiet. Forks stopped moving. Conversations froze mid-sentence. My father-in-law stepped forward, clearing his throat with the authority of a man who'd rewritten his own story 100 times. "That gift always belonged to the family," he said. "Times change." I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I turned, walked out the front door, and sat in my car with my hands gripping the steering wheel. It was no longer about jewelry or property or media lies. It was about ownership of truth. I spent the next hour writing a speech in my head, a letter to the press, to neighbors, to anyone who still believed I was the woman they once knew. But I stopped halfway through. Too many facts still needed verification. Instead, I opened my laptop and emailed every document, photo, and memory I had. I sent them to my lawyer, to reporters, to every person on my contact list who mattered. Subject line: public record, private truth. I uploaded a side-by-side comparison, one photo of me wearing the necklace at my mother's funeral, the other from the family gathering with it now around Izzy's neck. They thought silence would erase me, but I've learned noise can be crafted too, not chaos, clarity. And clarity, when loud enough, cuts deeper than spin. The morning the exposé dropped, I didn't even make it to the coffee pot. My phone was already lit up like a Christmas tree. The headline screamed across every notification: "The battle over a 3.5M federal legacy." I clicked. It was the story we'd worked on, my documents, my side of the fight, the deeper history of the house, but the tone had shifted. Somewhere between my truth and their edits, something got lost. The piece read like a movie script. Sensational, almost mocking. They'd run my quotes, sure, but sandwiched between Thad's public denial and old neighbors calling me obsessed with legacy. Cable news picked it up by lunchtime. One anchor smirked, calling me another homeowner hoarder with a savior complex. The next segment showed Thad, calm as ever, in a pressed blue shirt, telling the world, "She's always been passionate, but this has gone too far." He ended with that smile I used to believe. In that moment, I realized facts don't win. Narratives do. I was barely done replaying the interview when I got a message from someone named Darnell, local housing advocate. Said he read the piece and wanted to help. Claimed he had connections, knew how to flip the media script. I was skeptical, but I called him back. He showed up the next morning with energy that filled my entire living room, spoke in sound bites, wore slogans on his shirt like armor. "Protected land, protected voices," it read. Within 48 hours, he'd organized a rally right on my front lawn, handmade signs, chanting college kids. Local press returned, lenses pointed in a new direction. For the first time in weeks, the conversation shifted. My inbox filled with support from historic preservation groups. Women messaged saying they finally saw themselves in my story. But something didn't sit right. Later that night, over takeout, I caught Darnell on a call. He didn't notice I was behind him. "Yeah, once this lawsuit hits, the precedent's ours. She's the face, but the structure's ours." He hung up before I could process the whole thing, but I knew enough. I reached out to Melissa, an old friend who never played games. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Be careful," she said. "Not every hero wants you to win. Some just want to be in the frame when the cameras roll." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The following morning, my lawyer called. Thad's team just filed a petition to freeze every account tied to the property: checking, utilities, anything with your name on it. My grocery card declined at checkout that afternoon. I stood there with frozen peas and judgmental eyes behind me. Back home, lights flickered. Heat kicked off. I sat in the dark, wrapped in 2 sweaters, and called a former professor from law school, explained everything, asked for help, not as a victim, but as a peer. By evening, I had scanned federal registry documents in my inbox, highlighted sections showing preservation interest from 4 decades ago, evidence that the property fell under federal protection, meaning it wasn't just real estate, it was historical record. That night, I sat on the porch with a candle and recorded a voice memo. They tried to erase me, but the ink hasn't dried yet. The cold sank into my bones, but it kept me sharp. Darnell called an hour later, voice tight. "They're coming after me now. Threats, emails. I can't be the face." I told him not to worry. You're off the plan. I'm not dragging anyone else through this. Then I opened my laptop and began writing. Not a sob story, not a plea, just a letter. I listed the timeline, the documents, the photos, the edits, the threats. I uploaded everything to a secure drive, drafted my post, and scheduled the live stream. By 8 p.m., I was ready. 10,000 people tuned in. No filters, no makeup. Just me and a screen. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I ended with one sentence. If they think I'm just a wife, they forgot I'm also a witness. The courthouse smelled like old varnish and burnt coffee. Rows of wooden benches creaked under the weight of strangers who'd been following my fight for months. Press badges, cell phones half hidden in palms, eyes fixed on me as if I were a character in a trial more public than private. The judge sat unmoved, expression carved out of stone, his reputation for cutting through theatrics earned and visible. My attorney began with the evidence trail, laying down copies of federal preservation markers dating back 4 decades, the photos, the emails, the footage of Thad's car parked outside. No flash, no flourish, just facts stacked neatly like bricks. Thad's lawyer leaned back, projecting calm while playing a clip from an early protest. "This is instability," he said. "A woman consumed by obsession." I stood only once. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. "This house was built before I was born," I told the room. "But it's carried my soul longer than any person has." The judge lowered his eyes to the papers, tapped the gavel once. "Control over the property is returned to you due to federal code violations. Emotional damage claims are declined." One sentence that gave me back my house, but not the years or the ache. Reporters waited outside like gulls. "Will you keep it now that you've won?" someone shouted as I walked past. I didn't answer. Driving home, silence filled the car heavier than any verdict. When I stepped back inside the house, something felt different. I pulled open an old vent cover to clean dust and found a letter wrapped in yellowed twine. My mother's handwriting. She'd hidden it years ago. Her words blurred as I read them. Regret, recognition, forgiveness. It cracked a wall inside me I didn't know I'd built. I called a local preservation trust that afternoon, told them I wanted to list the house under federal heritage status. Not as property, but as a living archive. By evening, the decision was made. I'd sell the house myself, on my terms, and funnel the proceeds into a foundation for women like me who'd been silenced over land, inheritance, or legacy. The next morning, I drove out to the cemetery, stood at my father's grave, not asking for an apology, just leaving the weight there. In my coat pocket, an unsent letter addressed to the family, words they'd never read. Grief didn't make me weak, I thought. It made me a damn architect. Back in town, I signed the documents to transfer the house into a historical trust. Darnell sent a handwritten note a week later. "You started something bigger than either of us." The public stopped calling me a victim. They started calling me a voice. I bought a small apartment in a city where nobody whispered when I walked in. It was warm, modest, filled with light. I set up a microphone in the corner and began recording the first episode of my new podcast, Rooms of My Own. The opening line wrote itself. "When they tried to sell my house, they forgot I lived in it." Sponsors came quickly. Letters from women across the country arrived, filled with stories of inheritance, silence, betrayal. A former prosecutor emailed asking if I'd speak at a law conference. I closed my laptop one night and looked out the window at my new street. No family names, no press trucks, just my own breath steady in my chest. "My voice is not revenge," I whispered. "It's proof I stayed."